don't know if this is very, very Christian of me to say, but...
Hello and welcome everyone to another episode of the QTCast, the official podcast for the QTRL. That's the Queer and Trans Research Lab, which is housed at the Bonham Centre for Sexual Diversity Studies at the University of Toronto. My name is Elliot, and this episode I won't be your host. What you're about to hear was entirely hosted, recorded, edited, and produced by Ezra and Henry Yang, undergraduate research assistants to the podcast. Henry and Ezra sat down with Luna Okazaki, Annisa Azar, and Zoe Faber, the other undergraduate research assistants at the lab, for a special undergraduate roundtable, which starts now.
So jingle plays in the background. Okay, hi everyone, welcome back to another installment of the QTCast. Today we have a very special episode because it's our undergraduate spotlight. So you'll probably notice that I'm not Elliot, I'm Henry. I'm one of the undergraduate RAs at the Queer Trans Research Lab. I'm joined today by my fellow hosts.
Hi, I'm Ezra. I am also an undergrad at the QTRL, and I will be hosting this episode with good friend Henry.
Yeah, awesome. And obviously, an episode would not be complete without its guests. I am joined today by our three lovely other undergraduate RAs. So I guess we'll just jump straight into it with introductions. We have Annisa, Luna, as well as Zoe. So I guess in that order, would you guys please introduce yourselves, your names, your position at the QTRL, and what you're currently working on in the lab specifically. So Annisa.
Okay, so I guess I'll be starting based on the name designation. Hi, I'm Annisa, and I'm currently one of the undergrad RAs. And I'm currently working with one of the community fellowships with Ellie Ottaker. And what she's doing at the lab right now is that we're working on, we're looking specifically at sex workers in the university campus and how they navigate throughout the campus, especially campus life. And we're trying to compile a lot of research on that and how the university itself maybe works to harm these sex workers or just limits their mobility on campus. And possibly at the end of our research, we're gonna just try and come up with a sex worker toolkit for future sex workers in the university campus and maybe other university campuses too, to look at, to help navigate further in their own work and try do their work as safely as possible. So it's a lot of looking at research policy and shit like that. But yeah, I guess that's just good summary of what I do here.
Mm-hmm. Awesome.
And I'll pass it to Luna.
I just realized that this is alphabetical order. It's really nice coincidence. Yeah, whatever. Hi, I'm Luna. I'm one of the undergrad RAs here at the QTRL. I'm currently working with Christopher Smith, who is the program coordinator. So his work revolves, he actually does a lot of things around the lab in general. So it's a lot of Excel sheet work. And there's but on the side, his own individual project is focused on Black Pride parades. So I've been doing a lot of researching around just collecting data of all the Black Pride parades in the world, and then finding archival materials videos and images, and then all these interviews and stuff like that. We're currently trying to figure out a way how to compose all of that and then make one clear archival file to just organize certain things, because it's just a lot of material. But yeah, that's basically what I do. I really like it here, and yeah, that's about it.
Awesome. Sounds great. Yeah. And then Zoe.
Hi, my name's Zoe. I am an undergrad at the QTRL, and I work with Alfonso King Jr., aka Jade Electra, aka DJ Relentless. So that's their three names. And what we're working on really is they're a community leader. So what we're working on a lot is organizing HIV positive events in Toronto. The next one is March 12th. It's a mingle event. It's organizing for Spearhead, and it's raising money for a charity organization of their choice, and that's really exciting, so we're planning for that.
Great introductions, and a great way to just get to know you guys and what you're kind of doing around here. So this is a really important question that we do have to ask. How do you like the lab? And you can get as honest as you want. How is it like, has it added anything to your year? Has it caused you more stress? Are you finding it really enjoyable? Like, what's going on?
Okay, so first off, I really do enjoy the lab. It's definitely been such a great time here. Like, I'm like really thankful that I actually got the experience to do this and just like, getting recommended for it. But it is very different from what I expected, I'll say that. When I like just thinking of the idea of like being a research assistant, I think it has like a specific set of goals, especially within the realm of academia. You're associated with like these very certain specific rigid things, and then you actually go into like this position and you find out it's actually like, very different. It's like a lot more loose. I found my schedule to be like, it was still like, you know, a bit of like an addition towards things, but it was still very just like, oh, you don't necessarily have to focus too much on this task, or like it isn't necessarily just interviews you're looking at, or just like very archetypal like type of research work. It's just very, I can't try and find like a different word other than loose, honestly. But it's just very like not chilled, but just free form. That's the best thing I'll say. It's very free form.
Yeah. I've been enjoying it a lot. I think outside of like working with Christopher, well, first of all, about that, I've always had the idea of like being an assistant, especially that label has like a lot of like power dynamic to it in the first place, and then I've always had the idea of like working for somebody, and so I was using that word a lot when I was talking to Christopher, and then he mentioned it. He was like, you're not working for me, you're working with me, we're in collaboration. And I think that's like something that I learned throughout just coming to QTRL and then coming to like the share and tells. It's like, oh, this is like collaborative work. It's not necessarily something that's like super appreciated in academic spaces a lot of the time. I think like a lot of time it's like, oh, like assistants will always have dirty work and do all like the things that people don't want to do. But I think it's such a unique experience for me, and I'm so grateful that I get to have this like I get to share a lot of like emotions and also thoughts and like it's just, yeah, I really like it, and it's very different and it's not what I expected, but I'm enjoying myself, so yeah.
Personally, I'm really enjoying the lab. I think that it's really great because especially like the pandemic, like we were very online, it felt very isolating, and I think that I've been able to meet some really interesting people like y'all because of working at the lab. And I think that being around people who are so interested in like the world and positionality and the way that we interact with one another and ourselves is really fascinating and inspiring. And yeah, I think that's the gist of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, awesome. All great answers, definitely. This is more of an anecdotal question because, trust me, to people who are listening to this, you're really going to like the answer. How did you guys get introduced to the lab, out of curiosity? Like, how did you guys join the lab?
Well, I think I can answer for most of us here, and that we can all signal to our Lord and Savior here. That is Dr. Naveem Manai.
Shout out to Dr. Naveem Manai. We love you.
Yes, we love you. Shout out Dr. Manai. She's the one who recommended me to the lab as a research assistant. I actually had no idea this lab existed until I got the email from Dana, the head of the lab. She said, "Oh, we want to offer you this position in the lab," and you came highly recommended by Dr. Manai. And it was just like, "Oh, I'm so glad that Dr. Manai thought of me like this." It was just like it was like very lovely and affirming.
Yeah.
So it's just like, and as we talked before, I think all of us had a similar experience with that. Yeah. So it's just like, lesson learned, folks, to the people who are like, what's it called, listening to this. Don't shut up in class. It will help you out in the end. Let me just say that.
Yeah, definitely. So unless anyone has any other answers, that was definitely a fake-out question. Just so that everyone knows how specifically the undergraduate research assistants are introduced to the lab for anyone's future reference. So I guess adding on to all of your guys' current experiences at the lab, I wanted to ask specifically if there was anything interesting, funny, awful, just one thing that you wanted to spotlight that you have currently learned about in your current research project.
I think personally, something that has been so great for me is working with Alfonso, because they are like so full of knowledge. Like, they have lived a very queer life for a very long time, and not to make them sound like they're old. I don't think that they would like that. They have a youthful energy, okay? But they're just so full of knowledge and history, and like they've met people that I'm like inspired by, like that are so fundamental to like queer history, that it's just like, it's like awe-inspiring. I think it's amazing.
Yeah, definitely. That sounds great.
I think one thing that I've learned is a lot of the work that I do currently actually correlates to a lot of the my coursework. So I'm taking a course called Methods in Queer and Trans Studies, and we're learning about like how we can do research basically. And I think throughout that and throughout having conversations with Christopher, it's been really interesting to see how both of my worlds have like collided, and then it's a bit of taking a bit of both. So I get to learn a little bit in the lab, and then I get to learn a little bit in my coursework, and then that kind of relationship results in like my like thinking about like how I want to proceed with my own work, and so not just like with Christopher's work as well. So it's been like in a way like a transformative experience, and I'm like really enjoying it. Yeah.
I guess also like just in general commenting also on like Luna's thing, because like we're both in that same queer and trans ethics class. Same goes with our good friend Henry here. So it's just like, yay, our trio.
Oh yeah, the Three Musketeers, except awful. Anyways.
We're not awful. Come on, don't put yourself down like that, man. And so, yeah, I guess it's just been helpful on that front, just like, a whole collaborative experience on that. I think one thing also the labs taught me is that communication is extremely vital. Like, I didn't realize exactly how good it is to, like, be so consistently communicative with, like, with who you're working with, especially with Ellie. Because what I realized is that we both have very busy schedules, because Ellie works a lot. My research also is in collaboration with Maggie's, which is the big sex worker organization in Toronto. And so she's, woo, Maggie's. And so because of that, she's like working with like a lot of this activist work. And I always find that very vital, because like I feel like she's like very involved in the community. But also, it's just like she's also very busy. We're both very busy. So one of their issues, I think, is like trying to like book time for us to communicate together one-on-one, like updating on our own work. And so as a result, I realized, we got to be really communicative about like what our desires, our needs are in the future, or just like what do we want to plan forward, or like check in with one another. And I think that's something I really valued as that, especially because like, I think me and Ellie are also like kind of like really similar in age in some sense, where it's just like it doesn't really feel like there's like a very big power dynamic between us, which is something I really appreciate, especially in the context of academia where like power dynamics feel so just like evident. So it's nice to have someone who's like, I can be on a general level with them and still like have that like good communication with them. So it's like, yeah, that's just generally what I value.
Definitely.
Okay, well, I'm going to ask a question that sort of jumps off of what Luna talked about. So we don't have our own research positions yet, but like if you were to have like your own little like you were given, you know, the grant to do whatever you wanted, like what would you guys do? What would you guys choose to research?
Yeah. And think big here, no constraints. Like let's pretend this is a hypothetical question where nothing is off the table.
Go crazy.
Yeah.
I feel like personally, like, I think that a lot of what I think about and like my major and minor specifically, how they interact, I would love to learn more about like the impact of religion on different like in queer people, in queer like spaces, because I think that a lot of queerness is, I don't know if this is very, very Christian of me to say, but very like shame based, you know, like learning to overcome shame. And I would love to see like how religion may influence that, like organized religion specifically, like how it may influence that, how it may amplify or even serve to help that. Because I was reading about how a lot of queer migrants actually still like their religion that they were brought up in, even though it may have been a source of like persecution for them. And I think that's fascinating. Like I would love to learn more about how religion interacts with people, especially queer people.
Yeah, I was like thinking of my own interests, and I think I kind of relate to like what you said about like queer people growing up in like spaces that are contested or like contested spaces, but like also simultaneously like appreciating that. And for me personally, I grew up in, well, I'm from Japan, and I grew up in a very like in a place where queer representation for me wasn't available, especially in like mainstream media. And then there's a lot of like binary gender stereotypes, and it's just, it was really hard for me to figure out sexuality and that fluidity. But then like right now I'm in a place where I can like kind of appreciate that in a way, but like through a queer reading. And so I wanted to like, if I were to do a research program or project, it would probably be something on like Japanese media, like representation, like but like through queer readings or something like that. I don't know. I don't really have like a, you know, concrete project right now, but that's something that I've been thinking about recently. Yeah.
Okay, because like I got like a couple ideas in my head. I'm not gonna like bore everyone or just like take too much time with like just explaining all of them. But I think one thing that's been in my head recently, because like a lot of people in the lab are kind of like talking about it. And so you kind of mentioned it when you're talking about like queer like religious spaces and like how queer people navigate that. And I was thinking that more so in relation to South Asian migrant communities in Toronto and how they navigate queerness, especially because, for a bit of context, I'm from Toronto. I lived in Toronto pretty much all my life. And I always lived on the east end of the city. And so what's interesting is that a lot of like the queer stuff in Toronto is like mainly centered in downtown. So if you live like on the east end, like Scarborough or anything like that, it's really hard to like navigate that. And being queer in Scarborough, like anywhere out of downtown really. So I want to maybe like, if I was to do something like that, I would want to navigate how like queer people, like maybe queer youth or queer adults, navigate being like in those spaces, or just like navigate their queerness in their own like areas as well, and where it just feels like there's not really much of like a place to belong, or like consider like how like community is formed in some sense. So it'll be interesting to maybe like look at that and like look at what spaces are formed like informally, formally, And so yeah, I guess that will be something I'd be looking at. And of course, again, the South Asian aspect, because like South Asian culture tends to be like, again, really conservative in some sense. So it'll be really interesting to see how like queer people like navigate that, especially with families, because like family's such an important tie in like South Asian culture, and it's just like, how do you navigate that when it just feels like you want that tie to your family so badly, but also it's just like it feels like they don't really accept you as much. So like I think that would be just like really interesting to look at in some sense.
I feel so seen by that. That is so cool, because I've thought about like also like wanting to research similar things, except like in a different cultural context. Like for me, it would be more like Middle Eastern, Mediterranean sort of thing. But like, yeah, like you understand the struggle.
Yeah,
like,
totally.
You live in the East End, like it's impossible. There's like no, you know, it's not downtown Pride.
Yeah, it's not downtown Pride. It's just like, and you don't really just want to go downtown all the way all often, you know?
God, no.
God, I've done that too much with the university right now. It's just still hell. So yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Those are also all, by the way, like really great answers, because I know like we've all talked kind of individually about what our interests are in regards to like what we're currently studying in school, and also what our personal interests are. So it's really cool to, I guess, hear what everyone's thinking about in regards to like long term, what they want to actually, I guess, academically really delve into. Because I remember also at the reception, which was one of the introductory meetups for our research lab to get everyone to know each other, we actually all talked really briefly about our current interests. Like I remember specifically we had a conversation about like different queer readings of different religious texts. There was one specifically that you mentioned, I don't remember what it was, but how like a lot of ideas of like rebirth and renewal in a lot of religious texts can have explicitly trans readings, for example. Yeah, I remember us talking about that, and I thought that was really interesting as well. So yeah, I'm excited to see in the future. It makes me really excited about the work that we could potentially do, and it's great to have a lot of the, I guess, academic foundations and resources working in the research lab to best prime us for what we want to do in the future. So yeah, I guess kind of similarly along the research vein, obviously I'm sure that we all enjoy what we're currently doing at the lab. But if you could pick any of the other research projects that are currently going on within the research lab, is there anyone that you would consider like also working underneath, or like also working with, maybe from like the previous sharing talks that we've seen, or just generally from what you've heard? You know, think of it here.
Oh yeah, it was Anna Kozak. She was telling me about her, dissertation completion thing, because like her dissertation's on queering the American autobiography, and I was really fascinated by that, because like autobiography is like such an interesting thing to me, because it's just like you're recounting your own life, but like I think also there's certain autonomy towards to like autobiographies and general mythography, because it's feel like, oh, it's your own accounts, that means it's technically the most truthful account. I'm saying truth in air quotes, because like we have a tendency to fib our own lives and stuff, and also how those fibs tend to like led themselves to like certain ideologies, or just like certain like instincts we have on narrative in and of itself, and it's always interesting to examine that. And I always love like examining like autobiographies in that sense, especially like in a queer context too. Because like I think one of the ones she was mentioning was Fun Home by Alison Bechdel, which is like excellent book, but like if you're queer and listening to this, you've probably already heard of that. Not to stereotype, but you know. And so I think she said that was the one she was examining, and I was just like, oh wow, this is like seems like so interesting, being like queer perspectives and how like queerness is examined through the autobiography.
Right. Yeah.
Especially in like, because like I think with queerness as a whole, it's just like agency is kind of like not left to us in some sense. So I guess that's what makes what makes the autobiography more vital to that degree, because it's just like, you know, it's so like, it's again that level of agency that's just brought to you. It's just like, I have my narrative to say, and I'm gonna say it how I want to say it. So I think that's very fascinating. But yeah, I guess that's one of the ones.
Yeah. I personally was like, when I went to TL Cohen's Share and Tell, I was really like, there was something that clicked inside of me, because I was going through the process of like getting accessibility services, and then that it was just like very coincidental. I don't know. I think I have like a lot of coincidental moments in my life, But like, yeah, there was something so moving about like listening to a U of T professor actually talk about going through that process and going through the stages of like not only grief but also dealing with the everyday while simultaneously dealing with your own timeline, because time doesn't move the same as like able-bodied people or like non-neurodivergent people, but like it's just, it was so fascinating to me because like I've never heard someone talk about like mental health in that regards, but it touched me in like a way that was like, I want to learn more about that. I want to like know more about that because I feel like it's just not talked about enough. And yeah, if I could like ever have like an opportunity to just like learn more about that, then that would be cool.
Yeah, definitely.
I feel the same way. That's the one that I was gonna talk about.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because like, yeah, the discussion of like PTSD and being in an academia and being very neurodivergent and trying to like personally, like I have to do so many things to just like function the way a normal person does. Like it takes me like 5 steps to do something that takes someone like 1, you know? And it's so exhausting. And I think that like, especially like when you think about like, I can't remember what it's called, accessibility services. When you think about accessibility services and how limited they are and how they're really just trying to tell you to like fit in or get out, you know, they're just like a method to control the ideal student or like create one. And I think that's I think that T.L. Cohen's was really fascinating. Yeah. But everyone's is so cool and so interesting, like so unique. Like I'm constantly blown away by how I'm like, no one has ever studied this the way that you have.
Yeah.
Like this is so unique.
Definitely. I specifically really get what you're saying. I thought what you mentioned in regards to how accessibility services, really a lot of their methods are just ways of, I guess, like priming the ideal student. That was really generative to me because I think T.L. Cohen also, Professor T.L. Cohen, also echoed a lot of similar sentiments, and that I think rather than accessibility services acknowledging that there are different learning styles, the different methods and I guess accommodations that they do give you don't necessarily fit into your specific learning style. Rather, they're more so methods of you fitting into already kind of like etched in grooves of what is expected for learning habits of students, if that makes any sense, which isn't an effective way of going about diverse learning styles.
Yeah, I was thinking like also Professor TL, but also Ellie as well, because like I think that both of the things that like they're studying just like really mean a lot to me, where I was like, I would gain so much personal fulfillment from learning about these things or like engaging with them more. But yeah, at like Professor TL's show, Sharon Tell, I was just like, I went home and I cried a little bit because I was like, yeah, and I'm currently trying to get accessibility services, and well, you know, it's going, it's happening, I guess. But yeah, like the things that like I need are like just not like services that they can provide, and like it's so inaccessible to access accessibility services. Like it's just ridiculous. Like one of my main complaints is that this is like a complaint in general about like the way that the school sets up websites, is that nothing is clear. Like you go to like the accessibility portal, but then it like doesn't tell you like what exactly you're supposed to do or like where to send it, and like fix your web design.
It's like a university that's like feels so focused on what's it called, technology in some sense. It's like you expect them to have a bit better website design or just like more accessible website design, but I guess it doesn't fucking go in that department.
I got an email from accessibility services too, where the whole thing is that in the email they never once clarified where I'm supposed to send this to.
Yeah.
I was like, how do you anticipate like me just figuring this out because I don't know. You haven't told me anything.
Yeah, I had a similar thing because I was trying to get tested for like ADHD, and I remember they told me like, oh, we gotta fill these 2 forms out, and then we can do like an in-person appointment. And then I realized, wait, I forgot to ask where I should send it in to them. And luckily they called me back because I had to get my health card information. And then I asked them, and they're like, oh, you just fax it. And I'm like, who the hell faxes shit these days? I like all love to all the old people listening to this, but like, I don't have a fax machine, so it's just like, and they didn't elaborate any other option further. I'm like, how do you expect these people to function?
Yeah, exactly. Like, it's just, that's not effective communication. Okay, sorry. Yeah. Anyways, you know. Yeah.
Okay. Great. So now that we've finished talking about everything that we do hate, let's talk about some things that we like. So, I guess just generally, moving away from academia, any hobbies, and I guess also moving back into academia, if you could pick a research project to do based on one of your hobbies.
I recently got back into dancing. And,
Yeah!
and I used to do competitive dancing, and I used to do ballet since I was like 3 until like 18.
Oof.
So it was like a big part of my life, but then that also kind of caused me issues, and I took a mental break from it, and then I came back to it, and I'm like relearning how to love it.
Yeah.
And I'm really enjoying myself. And then I've always had like not only like dance friends, but I also have like a lot of like film friends who are studying in the US right now.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to, if I could do something regarding dance, film, and then like something queer, then that would be cool, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely, yeah. I get exactly what you mean, because I know there's like the standard quote, which is like a dancer dies twice, whatever. But I think also for a lot of art, specifically like anyone who does performance or music, et cetera, there's also kind of like 2 renewals, in that the first time you do like music or art, for example, is when you do it the kind of standard procedural institutional way, and then the second time is after you've dropped it and you pick up that like art again, and you realize how to recontextualize the art in a way that makes sense for you, and that's when you actually genuinely start to learn how to love it. I think is such like an interesting and beautiful concept. So I totally get what you mean, because I also recently just picked up piano and songwriting again and composing. So I'm like kind of in the same boat as you. Also, interestingly, it's not exactly the same thing, but I know also we have another graduate dissertation completion award recipient at the research lab. They're named Camille Rogers. They're also doing a similar research project, I believe. Yeah, opera. Yeah. The specific project is called Listening for a Queer Utopia. Looking forward to that. Yeah, anyways, other answers. Yes, I'm excited for your answer, because we talk about music a lot.
yeah, because like all that talking about like music is like, it's kind of like a general thing known in the lab, but like I'm a bit of a music nerd. And one thing that's, sorry, Luna was just pointing at my Discman that I have, because one of my, I guess, quirks on campus is that I carry a Discman around with me all the time because I like collecting CDs, because like it's like my primary form, which is like collecting music in general. And I just been doing a lot of like research in like subcultures, I guess, because like especially on like the 90s American indie / alternative scene. I'm like currently reading Our Band Could Be Your Life by Mike Azerrod, and that's a book specifically on like a lot of the big not 90s, but like all of the big like American indie underground acts. So bands like Black Flag, The Replacements. One that I've been actually getting into recently is Sonic Youth. Yeah. So I know Sonic Youth so good. So it's just like, so I'm just like looking a lot at that. And in terms of like research project, I can't put in the full details for this yet, because it's still like a lot of the information is going on about going yet. But because like one of my favorite artists is Beck as well, and I'm in the process of like maybe doing a bit of like possibly in the future a project on Beck, because like one of my good friends is like doing something related to that. Again, I can't reveal the full details because it's still like, you know, in negotiations right now, but hopefully I'll be like more involved with that. and like producing something involving that, which I'm really excited
That's
for.
So cool.
Mm-hmm.
I also just wanted to note that I'm also a huge music nerd and audiophile, but it was after seeing Annisa with their Discman that I was like, wait, I love CDs. Like, because of Annisa, I went, and now I have the same Discman. And now I'm also growing my CD collection. So, trendsetter, influencer, icon.
Thank you for gassing me up here. I really appreciate it. Like, I need more for my ego.
Personally, I think that like the end of the line poetry press thing, that was really inspiring to me because one of my hobbies is I really like poetry. I'm obsessed with poetry. I was really unbearable in middle school, and you know what? And that it needed to happen. It needed to happen so that I could. Yeah, it's a metamorphosis. You have to be a caterpillar for a bit.
Get all Kafkaesque here.
Yeah, no, absolutely, I will. And I would love to do something like that, like, because I love poetry. I have this whole hobby where, and I'm really bad at meditation, because, like, I think we've talked about this, like, I think we're all neurodivergent. I cannot just sit still and think of nothing. I have to be doing something, so instead I write down poems that I think are really interesting, that match my mood at the moment. I do it when I'm angry, I do it when I'm stressed, I do it when I'm happy, do it when I need to calm down. And I would love to get into, I don't know, like poetry journalism, poetry journals and stuff like that. Yeah.
It's like, yeah, I write poetry. Is it good?
That's so real.
Is it good? I don't know. I think there's some on my Instagram if you guys want to look at it.
I've read it before. It's actually very good. Like,
Yeah.
Oh,
shout
thank
out.
you.
Your Instagram is Madeline the Highlights, right? Top tier poetry.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I write poetry, and like what you said, like writing poetry down, like as opposed to meditating. Like I actually used to do that, and it's really helpful. It's a good coping mechanism. I
Yeah.
just wanted to say. Yeah.
Also, I just want to add, like, what's it called? Even if it isn't necessarily good, you should make shitty poetry just for shitty poetry's sake. Because, like, I think sometimes we get so used to commodifying our own, like, artistic habits sometimes.
Going back to like what you said in regards to Luna, like the two deaths and the renewal and whatever, like I paint and then I also write poetry.
Yeah.
And so I started painting because I had, shout out to like my amazing aunt who is like one of the most talented creative artists I've ever met in my entire life. So she taught me like the basics and then like inspired me to be like, just go with it, go crazy with your ideas. And so I had that initial upbringing with art, and then I like went to actual art school in high school, and it killed me. Like that was when my death happened, and then I stopped doing art for like the longest time, and then like only within the last like 2-3 years I'm like, I'm actually gonna like pick it up again, and now I'm like, what's my style, blah 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 whatever. And then like same with like poetry. Like for me, it's always been like, I write the poem because I'm like in the moment, like panicking or just like really thinking about something, and I'm like writing it, and then I'm fine. Like I'll literally write down like about a traumatic experience, and then I'm like into the void, send it off, and I'll post on Instagram. People are like, oh my god, are you okay? I'm like, oh yeah, no, I'm actually fine now. Like that was why I'm fine. And then the same with like the painting. Like I'll paint the thing, and people are like, this is disturbing. Are you okay? And I'm like, yes, actually, now I'm okay.
Yeah.
But yeah, I thought that's interesting.
Yeah, I used to feel so limited by like, especially people hate upsetting things.
Yeah.
Like I think people just like, there's that lame quote that's like, art is meant to
Yeah, I was gonna say,
like comfort the
comfort the
disturbed
disturbed.
and disturb the comfortable.
Oh.
I know it's corny, and I think it's really true. But people hate to see it, and like I used to create a lot more disturbing art. And then people hated it, so I got into like landscapes. Like, you know what I mean? Like I was just like that was a death for me. Like I was like really into landscapes. What is that? I did nothing there. Like I think that learning to reclaim like your own creativity for your own use and your own purposes is really powerful.
Yeah, definitely.
To end off our episode today, we just wanted to ask if you had anything that you'd wanted to tell someone who is currently outside of the Queer Trans Research Lab, or I guess just this general STS community. Do you have any advice for joining the QTRL? or just generally speaking, anything that you'd want to, I guess, like advertise. So like, hey, come join us, I guess, sort of along those lines, yeah.
Talk to Dr. Minai.
That's the overall.
Yeah,
Yeah, no, but
that truly is the most helpful tip that you could give.
but in all seriousness, take an SDS course,
Mm-hmm.
enjoy it,
Yeah.
do the readings, but they're fun.
Mm-hmm.
So, one thing about like SDS is like there's no pressure. There's no like weird pressure into doing like good. And I have like a couple of STEM friends, and they all talk about like really rigorous testings and stuff like that. But like there's no like. It's Henry. I'm so sorry. But, like,
For context, I'm a biochem kid. I'm very sorry.
no,
So our sympathies.
Yeah, our sympathy. It's like the first time I've ever been like, oh, this is like, I can do this for fun.
Mm-hmm.
And not have to worry about like, oh, like what am I gonna do about like this like essay, or what am I gonna do about this like grade? Like it's the first time where I didn't really need to care. So if you really like SDS, you might enjoy the lab as well.
Yeah.
I don't know.
No, yeah, definitely echo what you said in regards to taking an SDS course. I think regardless of what discipline you come from, it's always a good idea to take at least one in your undergraduate career. I'm saying this as a second year, like, take what I'm saying with a grain of salt. But I mean, like, I think the great thing about this department is that the classes are incredibly generative and perspective building. And you learn so much about specifically, like it really elucidates your specific positionality in the world and the way you interact with other communities, which is something that I think really not a lot of other disciplines can do, especially because like even other humanities courses, because I think a lot of them not necessarily fall victim, but they tend to choose a form of academic disciplinary measure that specifically focuses on kind of trying to find pattern and generalization within a lot of what they study and practice. And the great thing about sexual diversity studies and women and gender studies, et cetera, is that they break that notion intrinsically. The point of SDS is to disregard this notion of right or wrong and binary. And that is what I think makes it so interesting and relevant to everyone. Because at the end of the day, very few people fall within that binary, whether we like to admit it or not. And it's not like one of those like lame, like again, I'm a biochem kid. It's not the same thing as like, oh, biology affects all of us, therefore you should care about this biology course. Like, it impacts specifically like your identity and like the way you interact with the world, and that's why I think it's so generative.
Yeah,
But
it's really like self-reflective.
yeah, it's very self-reflective.
It's
I
very
agree.
like therapeutic sometimes.
Yeah, I agree. Also, like you learn so much about yourself specifically doing these
I'm
courses.
like, wow, I never
Yeah.
thought about myself like this.
Yeah,
And
even when
sometimes
you're.
it hurts.
Mm-hmm.
But like,
Yes,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
it hurts, but
Mhm.
we go through it, and then we're like, you know what? I'm so glad I did it.
Yeah, exactly. And it's even when you're not just learning about like communities that you're specifically situated in. Like I feel like even learning about other communities, like for example, like we're taking a queer and trans research methods class, for example, and it's really interesting to see how a lot of different types of research methods, while obviously sometimes being specific to other communities, also can be widely applicable to many other groups as well. So yeah. Anyone else?
Yeah, I think especially like if you're interested in like thinking about how you interact with the world and how the world interacts with you, and if you're interested in like learning more about yourself and everyone around you, and like if you have a curiosity about the world, you'll fit in,
Yeah.
you know? And I think that everyone does, whether or not they're aware of it. So, yeah.
I guess if I have any advice, like definitely like take SDS also for like that world building, but also take it just to have a sense of community.
Yeah.
Because one thing that's
Yeah.
one thing that's very nice about SDS I found is that it tends to be like it's a very close knit group, because like usually whenever I take a course in SDS, it's just like, oh yeah, I know this kid from this class and I know this kid too. It's kind of like the same similar groups of people. So it's just like very nice, and just like that building of like a sort of kinship, which is hard to find in academia a lot of the time, especially at UFT, because like I've been here for like 3 years now, and it's been so hard to just kind of find friends here in some sense. And that's one thing I really appreciate about the lab. It's just like, because I'm seeing so many of you so consistently, it just feels like I'm like developing a nice friend group here, just a nice sense of like kinship just in general. Also, I'll say it's great because like join the lab also because you get a chance to meet like older people as well, so you get a lot of experience from that because like there are a lot of people in the lab who are like grad students doing their PhDs and stuff. So you get if you're like any interested or just like possibly going to like grad school and stuff, it's also really interesting to like talk with them about continuing education and how that all works out and all that jazz. So yeah.
I would like to add on to that point and say that I think in general it's really important for younger queer people. I believe I'm speaking for all of us when I say we're all queer here.
We all are.
Okay, that makes sense. I think it's really important for younger queer people to like interact and to see older queer people because
that's been stolen from us.
Yeah, it's been stolen from us, and to like see that like every time I interact with an older queer person, I'm like, wow, like you are alive, you are living, you have this life, you are doing things like because that's just like not. Like those aren't role models that are given to us. We have to seek them out on our own and to like find them in this place. Like even my own RA supervisor, I don't even think they're that much older than me, but to just like see this person who's a little bit more into like adulthood and living a queer life, and I'm like, oh my god, like that could be me, and like that's so important. Yeah, that's my bit.
No, yeah, I definitely agree with what you're saying because it also reminds me of what we were learning about in a lot of our STS courses in regards to like the politics of invisibility and how a lot of communities a lot of the times tend to avoid leaving traces of themselves in history because that's another piece of evidence that institutions can use to find you and that can be unsafe, right? And the great thing about this department specifically is that we have a lot of people from not only just a lot of different disciplines, but specifically a lot of different backgrounds and perspectives. Perspectives specifically that you a lot of the times can't find easily within academic archive, medical archive, et cetera, which is why it's such a valuable opportunity getting to interact with these people on a daily basis. So yeah. Surprise, I guess you thought it was over. Welcome back. Ezra and I also had some more things I wanted to say. So Ezra, I just wanted to ask, adding on to all of the other really great sentiments that were addressed within the first half of the episode, what do you like the most about the lab? Like, how are you enjoying your time here? How have you liked working on the QTCast so far, et cetera, et cetera?
Yeah, well, I've really enjoyed working at the lab a lot. I really feel like it's sort of enhanced my school year, if anything. It's been really fascinating getting to meet all these different kinds of people, especially everyone who's doing like who's conducting research here, doing a project, and like getting to hear about that. In a lot of ways, I'm just so excited to like be exposed to like interesting, I guess like thoughts themselves, but also different ways of thinking about things that like I just had never considered. And then, I'm really being forced to reconsider a lot of different things in a lot of different ways. So that's been really cool, and have definitely also, like I said before, met a lot of really cool people, have made some really awesome friends. And I'd say overall, yeah, like I said initially, totally a huge enhancement to my year. And working on the podcast has been super cool, actually. I think that working on the podcast has given me an interesting up close approach to a lot of the people doing research, because I really get to hear from them in a more personal manner, or a bit more personal, informal, sort of get like a bit more close and almost ask more about like behind the scenes and such. So that's been really awesome. And then also just like learning like how does a podcast work? How do you edit audio? What goes into all of that? That's also been super cool to learn. Yeah, I mean, how do you like the lab?
Yeah, actually, before I jump into how I felt, I actually really want to agree in regards to like it actually like really enhancing my school year. I was like moving into this, this year I'm doing methods in queer and trans research methods, or sorry, studies in queer and trans research methods class with Professor Manaya. And one of the main topics within that course obviously is like around this idea of like qualitative research method, and interview as like a research method falls under that category, along with like cross-sectional studies and stuff like that. So it was actually really interesting getting to work with that interview method, like hands-on. It really helped, I guess, elucidate like the role of, I guess, quote unquote, subjective experience in research, because coming from someone who's like from a STEM background, it's not something, I feel like it's something that's like greatly underused or underappreciated within the scientific method. And it's been a really eye-opening experience, I would say, working with something that is pretty off the beaten path for me, I'd say. I'd also want to echo what you said as well in regards to like getting to hear from a lot of different perspectives from around the lab. I think that specifically the two of us are actually really privileged in that while everyone else in the lab is kind of forced to focus on one specific research project, we have the opportunity to sort of like sample all of the different really wonderful research endeavors that are happening all around the lab. Um, and I think it makes for a really holistic and also interesting experience because like my brain personally, I like moving around a lot in regards to like what I'm thinking about. And I think um working on the QTCast kind of fits that for me perfectly. I get to, research one of our guests pretty in depth, and then I move on to another one every time we have a new episode. And yeah, overall, it's just been very, very generative and fascinating. Just given the fact that I'm also pretty interested in what everyone else is doing in the lab as well. And it also should go without saying that, like, I have a bit of an IT background, so I actually really like working with sound. And doing all of the fun like clerical things that come with interview, as well as specifically with podcasting. So yeah, also of course, really big shout out to our wonderful, I guess you could say supervisor, Elliot, who's been, absolutely instrumental in helping us this entire time. Thank you, Elliot.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah. So the next question is, I think, a little bit hard to answer, but super fun. So, given that, we are just research assistants, we don't have our own positions yet,
Mhm.
yet being the important keynote word here, what would you be interested in working on outside of the lab? Like, no constraints, think big.
So for me, the reason why I joined the Sexual Diversity Studies department was because I'm specifically really interested in masculinity studies, specifically within East Asia. So I'm really interested, firstly, in looking at the relationality between many different East Asian cultures. Uh, I'm also interested in how like East Asian masculinities is specifically contextualized within media studies. So that's looking at different like academic as well as mainstream sources that depict things like fragile scholars, the rise of BL within the East Asian geography, I guess if you want to call it that. The difference in how we perceive star bodies within East Asian culture versus, I guess if you want to call it quote unquote Western culture. And also specifically looking at how conceptions and also depictions of like queer male homoeroticism has changed from like postmodern to contemporary times. I'm also really interested in specifically HIV and AIDS policy transnationally as well. Obviously, it's really interesting to look at movements such as ACT UP, movements that are very much so like Western centric. But I mean, at the end of the day, HIV/AIDS is kind of like a global phenomenon. And I think that's also really important that we expand the academic breadth of material that centers itself on what HIV and AIDS, from a health policy standpoint, looks like in countries, across the ocean, if you want to call it that. Specifically, how it impacts, people who come from queer backgrounds. Just given the fact that they tend to be the people that are most disproportionately affected by HIV/AIDS, especially transnationally. Well, it depends, obviously, but that's a discussion for another day. How about you, actually? Because we've actually had a lot of discussions in the past about what you're interested in, but I think it'd be really interesting for you to like really spotlight it right now.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I was like trying to think like while you're talking. By the way, I do think that the topic of masculinity is so interesting and hardly really discussed and like really delved into. But I do think like I'm personally just really interested in masculinity as a topic because I feel like there's so much that we could know or that we could talk about, but we don't. So really, really cool research topic, I think, that you've chosen. I think, I guess in a similarly sort of related vein, part of what really captured my interest with SGS was looking more into like things related to like my culture, or at least the cultures that I grew up with and came from, much of which is like Balkan or Mediterranean, if you will. And I was really interested that, or what I was really interested in learning more about that I was allowed to sort of investigate was like was this topic, because I didn't really feel like I had the room to really delve into that or like get really personal in other disciplines. But I've been really interested in understanding, I guess you could say that this is heteropatriarchy actually, and just like how the patriarchy as a whole like functions in, and specifically Roma culture, but also like I'm from this tiny island called Crete. Many people have probably heard of it. Many people have probably been there on vacation. For those who don't know, Crete is an island off of Greece. It is a very disputed territory actually between Turkey and Greece. And it's this very interesting island with a different dialect of Greek spoken, as well as like different ethnic and cultural um, populations going about. It's just a very interesting place. So that's where I'm from. And I've always been very curious about how the patriarchy is like such a strong figurehead in the family and just in the overall community. And I've always been interested in like dissecting that because, you know, I guess essentially what I would be really interested in is like archival studies or going back into history and thinking about like where did the patriarchy come from? How does it function? What are the roles of femininity and women? And looking into topics like, I guess, more domestic topics as well, like the family function, and sort of dissecting this idea of the nuclear family, because I definitely know for a fact that that was sort of imposed from Western influences. And I guess I'm really curious to see like what came before that. What was there? Like if I peeled back the layer of the westernization of everything, what would I see? What would I find? And then like similarly, going off of that, what about sexuality? What about sex, like as a whole? Like how is that dealt with? How is that talked about? Is allowed? Is it not? Or I mean, is sex allowed? Of course it's probably allowed, but you know, what are the customs? What are the beliefs? What are the values? Do we believe in concepts like virginity? What constitutes virginity? How important it is that a bride be a virgin? Things like, stuff like that. I'd be really interested in exploring that sort of stuff.
No, yeah, definitely. That sounds wonderful. I love specifically the specificity in regards to like you're obviously talking about a lot of like age-old questions that have, been prevalent in the minds of scholars for years. But like I love the specificity in regards to the specific culture that you're really narrowing your research onto. So yeah, sounds
Yeah.
really interesting. I guess rounding off our like a mini segment for our two hosts who really want to hog up time. Um, any advice for anyone who's like outside of the QTRL, or people who are potentially looking to join the QTRL, whether that be as an undergraduate research assistant or something else?
Okay, well, I'm going to echo what some of the other guests had already previously said, which is talk to Dr. Naveen Manai. Very, very lovely person, brilliant, super intelligent professor. If you've ever attended any of their lectures, you will be really captured by how eloquent their words are. And this is coming from someone who's not very eloquent when they speak. You definitely are in total awe. But just in general, like talk about your interests, talk about what interests you within the realm of STS. And you might think that not a lot of things could fit within it, but believe me, tons of things could be explored through an STS lens. And it is so cool, so interesting, but like be open about like what you're excited about, what you're enthusiastic about. It will totally lead to interesting opportunities and you will definitely have a great time. Do you have any advice for anyone outside of the QTRL or outside of STS that you would like to share?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, cool.
I would say, again, uh, first, okay, so actually, I want to echo two words that our director, Dana, always says in regards to what she would say to people who are looking at the SDS faculty, which is join us. I mean, it's a very welcoming faculty. The people who you work with and also people that you study alongside are some of the most like kind-hearted and intelligent people that you'll find at the university, I'm sure. And it also should go without saying that, I mean, contrary to like a lot of other fields that tend to be a little bit elitist, I guess you could say, or just given the fact that there's so many people that are trying to get into like certain STEM fields, for example, where they're kind of forced to call the field, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
STS, we're a relatively small faculty, and also we prize and like seek the perspectives of diverse people because that's literally what we study. And so it should go without saying that regardless of what your background is, where you come from, and what you believe in, your perspective will be valued and recognized, whether you're doing like a course, whether you're doing research in the faculty, et cetera, et cetera. And it should also go without saying that SDS is a very interdisciplinary field.
Yeah.
Like you have people who are again researching things that like Ezra and I are interested in, which obviously concern things like East Asian studies, Balkan studies, et cetera, et cetera. But then you also have people who are doing studies in political science, philosophy, health studies, et cetera, et cetera. And the list keeps on going. There really is like so many different applications for so many different fields. Without a doubt, you will be able to find your niche in this department. And I think that's largely what the beauty of the department is, like just truly how, I guess, academically flexible it is. So yeah.
Definitely.
Woo! And then ending jingle plays. Yay!
Yay!
This has been a QTRL production.